This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at www.thepmpodcast.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com.
Hello and welcome to episode number 71. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast for the 30th of June 2007. You will probably have noticed that communications technology seems to make the world smaller and smaller, and that all your project teams are suddenly all over the planet. Your sponsor is in Germany, your customer in Chile, your engineer may be in Togo, and 2 designers are in Sydney, and you yourself, of course, you are leading this team while you are sitting with your laptop at the beaches of Tahiti. What a great life we project managers have. But unfortunately, these virtual teams are quite demanding as well. You have to deal with a multitude of cultures. You have to figure out several time zones. And the fact that your team doesn't really have a chance to meet face to face and bond. That's not an easy task. Adrienne Keen can help. Adrienne is a PMP and manages virtual teams for Cisco Systems. She also teaches a seminar on effective virtual management at the University of California, Irvine, here in California. And today, you will hear her best practices. Today's episode is sponsored by mpmm.com. Want to gain total project management success? By using the MPMM project management methodology, you can gain immediate access to all of the processes, tools and templates you need to manage projects. Packed with more than 1,000 tasks, charts and practical examples, you can create project deliverables faster and more easily, saving you time and money. If you want to gain total project management success, then download a free trial now from www.mpmm.com. We first have 2.5 announcements, followed by 1 helpful resource, and then we move right into our interview. First, the half announcement. You may already have noticed that I have a cold, so if I have a very nasal accent today, pardon me. I've been in bed all week, and I'm barely making it to the microphone here at the moment. The first real announcement here is actually a thank you. It goes out to Brent Wilson. Thank you very much, Brent, because Brent was kind enough to click the donate button on the website, and he has given generously to the Project Management Podcast. We appreciate that. We are still trying to improve the sound quality here and get better equipment. We're working on that. And we appreciate everyone's support. The second announcement is that the Project Management Prepcast, our sister podcast where project managers can learn how to become PMPs, is having a giveaway. So if you are a project manager who is currently studying to become a PMP, why don't you surf over to www.pmprepcast.com and register? You might win a full subscription to the PMP workshop that we offer. It is 30 hours of PMP training split up into 77 easy to transport and easy to download podcast episodes. There is only one helpful resource that is complementing today's episode, and that is an article titled Working Together When Apart, and it comes to us from the Wall Street Journal. There's only one because after I found this one, I figured, why look for anything else? This is so good. This is a total gem. First of all, it is a very well-written article on virtual teams. It's just about 4 pages long, and in this, Linda Grattan from the London Business School discusses 10 best practices that they found on how to make virtual teams work. But then it is also a podcast, and you can download and listen to an 8-minute interview. And then it is also a video cast, and they give you a 3-minute video interview where you can actually see everyone, and it's additional information not included in the 8-minute podcast. Oh, and then they also link over to their internal discussion site where people have already posted questions and Linda gives her answers. So my congratulations go out to the Wall Street Journal for this particular free resource. Very, very well done. My recommendation to you, first listen to our interview today and then head over to the Wall Street Journal and also check out their helpful resources on the virtual teams. Together, they will give you a ton of tools to make your virtual life work. And of course, you can find a link to this particular and all other helpful resources that we have ever mentioned on our website at www.thepmpodcast.com. And now, let's head right into our main topic, the interview with Adrian Keene on how to manage virtual teams. Adrian Keene, PMP, is a manager of the employee and manager development for the services division of Cisco Systems Incorporated. She has over 20 years of information technology, business operations and consulting experience in the finance, automotive and high-tech industries. Her experience includes leading major projects as well as functional management. She has extensive experience leading global virtual teams. Of course, that's why I invited her today. Adrian has been active in the PMI for the last 10 years, serving in several board positions, including as my predecessor here as the president of the Orange County chapter. She is a webinar instructor and member of the UCI Extension Project Management Advisory Committee. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview. Today with Adrian Keene, PMP, Manager of Employee Development for Cisco Services.
Okay, hello Adrian, and welcome to the program.
Thanks, Cornelius.
To get us going, I'd like to look at the basics of virtual teams. So tell me, what is a virtual team and why are they challenging to manage?
Well, Cornelius, I've been working on virtual teams at Cisco Systems for approximately the last 5 years. And what's different is typically the teams are separated by distance or separated by geography. So you end up having to work across time zones, cultural differences. It's actually quite challenging. It brings a whole different level for the project manager from a co-located team. You have to really rely heavily on technology to help you to share information. So for instance, when you're in a team meeting and you're trying to get a concept well understood, you want to use a technology like NetMeeting or something called eCollaborate, where you can share your slides and share information.
What would you say is the biggest mistakes then that we project managers make when we are trying to manage virtual teams? Is it not employing technology or what is it?
I think it really centers around communication. We tend to make assumptions because we can't see people. When we're in a virtual team, all we can do is hear. We make assumptions perhaps about what's going on within the room. So we might be discussing a particular issue, and as a project manager, I might take the silence in the room to mean, great, everybody's on board. When what's really happening is people are rolling their eyes, they're checking their email, they're watching television at their house, and they're not even paying any attention to me. So I always tell people don't underestimate the amount of communication that you need to do as a project manager on a virtual team. I'd say my communication went from being 20 to 30% of my time to being 70 to 80% of my time as a project manager.
Wow. I assume you hate mute buttons, right?
I love the mute button because
on your end, right?
On my end. But yeah, there's a lot of things, etiquette when you're working with virtual teams that you have to talk to the team about when you get started about not, being on mute is okay, but checking your email and doing other things when you're on a team meeting is really disrespectful to the other people on the call. But it's very tempting and easy to do.
Yeah. We've all done it. I
personally
we're all guilty of this.
Have done this many times, yes.
Let me take you back to your very first project when you had to lead a virtual team. What was it like for you? What did you do? How did you do it? What would you do differently today?
Well, that first project was at Cisco Systems, and I was asked to work on a global team, lead a global team to develop consistent delivery practices across our organization of about 1,000 engineers. And I was working with people in all different time zones, all over the world, different cultures. And for the most part, I didn't know these people. So it was really challenging. I really had to spend time building trust, like getting to know people, spend a lot of one-on-one time getting to know them. We were fortunate enough to do one of my best practices, which is have a co-located kickoff meeting. So we got to bring the team together face to face and got to do a lot of team building and get to know each other there. I think some of the things that I learned, as I said before, was about making assumptions. And, on the virtual calls, I had to learn to listen not to what only was being said, but to what wasn't being said and who wasn't saying it. Mm-hmm. So if somebody was particularly silent on a call, I learned that I needed to follow up with that person after and really check in and make sure they were on board.
You said your favorite tool is to have a co-located kickoff meeting to build trust among the team. Now let's assume I don't have that because frankly, if I have a virtual team, but don't have the money for it. What can I do as a project manager in that situation? What are other tools and tricks that allow you to build trust on the team?
So I'll talk about trust from two perspectives. Building trust between myself as the project manager and my team members. I'm going to schedule at least one-on-one meeting, solid one-on-one 1 hour meeting where I'm going to talk to them and really get to know them, and not just about work, but get to know about their families, their hobbies, what kinds of things they like to do outside of work. And then from a work perspective, I want to understand how they prefer to communicate, how they like to make decisions, even how they like to get recognized. For one person, having a big rah-rah, making a spectacle of them is a reward. And for another person, it's their worst nightmare. So really trying to understand what makes them tick and how I can help them as a leader on their projects. And then the second aspect of that would be helping the team build trust between each other.
Right.
One of the things I like to do, one of the little exercises I like to do is give them a set of questions that where they have to go and get paired off and interview each other. And then on a team call, I'll have them introduce each other on the call. So they have to get to know each other well enough to introduce the next person, and then they get to learn about each other. I like that exercise in a kickoff meeting that's face-to-face too, but it's one of those things that you could use face-to-face or in a virtual.
Yeah. How does that work in different cultures? Did you ever get resistance there?
In different cultures? No, actually, I haven't gotten resistance in different cultures. I think that you have to be sensitive to how you structure the questions on the interview so that, if you do have a cultural situation where maybe people don't want to discuss intimate personal details, you don't put questions like that on the survey. You keep the questions more high level, like what's your favorite movie? Or, how do you like to be communicated with in the team meeting? Do you prefer email, instant message, phone call? What's your first favorite mode of communication? Those kinds of questions. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you have to be always culturally sensitive to that.
Right. So now we've looked a little bit at what virtual teams are, what the problem is. We've delved a little bit into best practices already. Let's try to fix more. Let's try to look at this from a more global perspective. You teach a seminar on leading virtual teams, and you talk about 6 key factors in your seminar. So let's take a look at all of them and see what a project manager can do. The first one that you mention is foster effective communication. So how do I do that?
Well, it's really about active listening. As I said, you need to be a much more active listener. I mean, active listening is always a key thing, but in the virtual environment, you have to listen to what's not being said. Who's quiet on the call? I had a situation with one guy where he was really quiet on the call, and in talking to him after the meeting, I found out that, he wasn't on board with my idea at all. And we actually had to go back and revisit it. And that really helped build the trust with him, the fact that I reached out to him to find out what was going on. Another thing I typically do is I validate assumptions. So I'll say, so what I hear you saying, Cornelius, is, whatever it is, right? I really use that phrase a lot, and I don't assume that I know what a person is meaning by what they're saying, because we don't have any of those visual cues. The other thing that I think is really important to do, especially on an important decision or on a sensitive issue, is to actually go out and poll the team members on the call and ask them for their opinion or their view or their vote. So have them individually weigh in. And some people are just really quiet on a virtual call. And it's sometimes you'll have some people that are very bullish and they just talk, and the other people can't break in. So that kind of leads me to one of the other best practices as a leader is to make sure that everybody's getting equal time on the call. So you really have to pay attention to who's talking and who's quiet and make sure everybody can break in. We do, one thing that we do is we have instant message at work. So we'll assign one person as, kind of the monitor in a big team meeting. And so if somebody's trying to break in and make a point, and they can't get in there, they can instant message the other person, and that person can, say, hey, Joe, Joe has a point to make. Let's let Joe in.
It sounds to me like as a project manager on a virtual team, especially with the communications, you need a lot of your soft skills. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, I really think it's 80% soft skills and 20% technology. Technology helps, but, if you don't have the soft skills and the listening skills, then the technology is really not going to matter. Mm-hmm. There was one other thing I wanted to add that I think is really important about communication. Because you don't have that opportunity for kind of those water cooler chats, yes. Or, say Cornelius, you did something in a team meeting that upset me. I might come by your cubicle and just say, hey, can we go get coffee and talk about it? It's really important to deal with issues right away. And really to think about how you're going to deal with them. It's really easy to hide behind email when you're in the virtual environment, but it's really not the best way to deal, especially with a sensitive issue or a sensitive situation. Use the phone. Find out how people want to be communicated with and use their preferred method of communication.
Yeah. Your second key success factor here is focus on building relationships and trust. We've already looked at that a little bit. We've had the co-located kickoff meeting, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other tools that you could mention in this area?
I think it's just about helping people to get to know each other. I'll give you a story. There was a person on one of my teams, and she was a really nice woman personally, and a very interesting person and involved with a lot of kind of interesting activities outside of work. And I got to know her very well. And sometimes on calls and meetings, she'd be fairly bullish and defensive, and it kind of put people off. But because I knew her and I knew her well, I knew that her intentions were good, so that I trusted that her intention was good, even though her delivery was a bit rocky at times. And I think that's really important. And the other thing about building trust in this particular situation was I could give her feedback and feel comfortable about that because we had built that trust up between each other. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important.
How about selecting your team? How does the selection of the team members play into being able to build trust?
Interesting question, Cornelius. I mean, normally I don't really select a team based on anything that has to do with a virtual team versus a co-located team. Mm-hmm. I mean, and in a lot of times, which is probably true with a lot of project managers, you don't have that much selection. Yes. You're given your team.
Yeah, here they are. Deal with it.
Of course, it would be great to select people that have a lot of experience being on a virtual team, but generally that's not the case. I just haven't really found that to be a criteria in selection at all.
Right. Third key success factor, establish team identity and key processes. Now, why would I want to have a team identity for a virtual team?
Well, if you think about it, when you're on a co-located team and, you work in a building and, people are talking about it, maybe you've got some posters up, you've got things going on that you feel really part of that team. But if you're on a team that's virtual and you might be the only person in your building in, Switzerland working on this project, and there's 10 people sitting in San Jose, California, and a person in Texas and one in Paris, if you're kind of those outliers, it's kind of easy to lose touch with what the project's all about. And I think it is really important on any project to have an identity, to really constantly reinforce the vision and the goals of the project with the team to keep them focused. But at Cisco, we often give teams names. Sometimes they're funky names and sometimes they're serious names. But a team name, oh, you work on Cisco Knowledge Connection, Cornelius. Oh, I know about that project. Yes, I saw the webinar on that last week. That's really cool. So it really helps keeping people feeling from being isolated and makes them feel a part of it and stay focused. The other thing is, if you're in a remote location, especially if you work for somebody who isn't the leader of this team, it's pretty easy to get pulled off into other work that's happening in your area. But if you have your identity and your focus knowing that, hey, I'm on the team that's going to totally change the way we do knowledge management in the group I work in, you're probably more likely to stay engaged in the team.
Is it just a name, or is it also a logo, posters, letterheads, signatures?
So you talked about funding before, Cornelius. I mean, it really depends. I've been on projects where we spent, tens of thousands of dollars to make posters, and we had a logo and we had a tagline for the project, and we actually had a contest to make the tagline for the project. Down to, teams where we just basically came up with a name and, we just sort of branded our emails with it and, kind of went from there, maybe had some t-shirts made. So it just really depends on the nature of the team. How long is this project team going to be together? Is it like a 2-week project? Probably not so important, but if it's a 1-year project, it's probably important to have that.
Okay. The next key success factor here, number 4, is conduct effective virtual meetings. We've already talked a little bit about your bag of tricks that you have. My question for you now here is, if you have teams or team members rather that are in different time zones, it's 8 o'clock in the morning for me, but it's 9 o'clock in the evening for the other person. Is there any fair way of dividing this up?
The real answer? Probably not. But are there workable ways? So, yes, there's workable ways. Every way that I've found has a plus and a minus to it.
Yes.
So somebody's always kind of getting the short end of it.
Yeah.
So one way is to have multiple sessions. So I've been on, several teams where it's a large team and we have a monthly, team gathering, and we do an 8 a.m. session for Europe and the U.S. and we do a 5 p.m. session for the, Western U.S., Asia Pacific, and split it up that way. One of the downfalls of that is you don't get the collaboration of East meeting West, right? You get, sort of the East talking and the West talking.
Yep.
So you have to do more work outside of the meeting to kind of pull that all together. The other thing you can do is you can rotate the time. So somebody's kind of out of luck every week on the meeting. And that works pretty well, but sometimes people forget, the team time is moving and, sometimes people forget. And then sometimes the person who gets the middle of the night, slot just doesn't come on that day because they just say, you know what, forget it.
I'm tired.
I've found that my rule of thumb is I don't schedule anything to start between midnight and 5 a.m. in anybody's time zone.
Okay.
Because you're really interrupting people's sleep. So, like in my company, Europeans are used to working at night. Asia Pac people are used to getting up in the morning. And India is a really tough one because they're 12 and a half hours off from California.
Yeah.
That's just a really tough one. So they're doing all sorts of weird hours. And we're doing all sorts of weird hours when we're meeting with India.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've done now, if it's a long-term project and, you've got people that are fairly dedicated to the project, we've had people work San Jose hours. So, for instance, if 20 people on the team are in California, and there's 5 people over in Europe, and they're dedicated pretty much 100%, they'll work 1 or 2 days in the Pacific time zone, and we try to do all the meetings for the team on those 2 days. We try to get all the meetings in those days when it's normal for them, and then they just work midnight to 10. Noon to 10 at night.
Yes.
And that works well. So lots of different ways to get around it. There is some great websites out there that can help you pick a good time zone for to have a meeting in.
Yeah.
So if you Google on, world time zones, you'll come up with those websites.
Yeah, I actually use them quite a bit lately. I have to schedule trainings for Japan and Hong Kong, and yeah.
Yeah, I actually have a little tool the little freeware tool that runs on my PC where I can put up as many time zones as I want, what the time is in the different places, and it's really helpful.
Yeah,
so that
for
I'm not
you as a virtual project manager, that must be a godsend almost.
It is.
You always know what the other team member's time is. Yeah.
You don't want to wake somebody up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, not a good idea. Key success factor number 5 here is recognize and reward team members. By rewarding, do you mean physically giving them something? We're coming back to funding here again. Or do you mean just, saying, nice job, well done?
Well, I think in my experience, what goes the furthest way with people is really being recognized with their peers for their achievements. The nice job, well done, but take it to the next level by letting their boss know, formally recognizing them at an organizational event. Getting them at Cisco, we have like teamwork awards and different things that are done at a fairly high level in the organization. So nominating people who have done a good job, really helping them to feel a part of the organization. Because a lot of times if they're virtual, or like in my case where I work at home, it really helps. That recognition helps me feel like I'm a part of the organization. I have a thing I call significant smalls, which is just occasionally reaching out and sending people, maybe like a little Baskin Robbins $2 gift certificate and say, have an ice cream cone. You've done a great job on the team. Or just sending a personal card with a note in it to people and recognizing that, how much I value their contributions to the team. So there's kind of the personal side of valuing the people as members of my team as a project manager. And then there's the part that helps them in their career, which is the recognition to, their manager and other executives and other peers in the organization.
Yeah. Does Baskin Robbins really sell ice cream for less than $2?
Well, maybe I haven't done one of those in a while, Cornelius. I guess I'd have to move up to $5 on that one. I did do $5 Starbucks ones last year for a whole team, and they really appreciated it.
Yeah.
And I sent, a personal card with a handwritten letter in each one.
I guess it's like bringing pizza to your team for lunch.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, one time when we were launching a big thing, we had everybody, we sent everybody a bottle of champagne.
Nice.
And everybody got on a call and popped it at the same time. So you get creative as a project manager, and really think of creative ways to reward and recognize people.
Finally, number 6 here is enable collaboration and communication with technology. You started out with technology here. Is there a particular technological trend that you see?
Well, I think that, again, it's going to depend on your company policies and the funding and everything else. Obviously, the most basic technology is the phone.
Yeah.
And then when you can add some collaboration software on top of the phone, that 300% improvement in the effectiveness. Now, the next step that I'm seeing is really the application of Web 2.0 tools to this. So wikis, blogs. One thing that we're seeing now in my company that I think it's going to be an interesting challenge for corporations is companies don't yet have the social networking tools within their enterprise that are available out on the public space. So things like MySpace and Facebook and Meetup, and there's lots of different tools that allow this many-to-many collaboration and sharing of information and photos and, real-time instant messaging outside the firewall.
Yes, but inside the firewall, it's a big no-no.
Very scary. So the trend that I'm seeing in my company is to address that, that opportunity inside the firewall. So one of the things we're looking at is taking our company directory and kind of putting it on steroids and making it like a MySpace site in order to help people do this many-to-many communication that, which really is the trend. That's where Web 2.0 is taking us. So that's what I see. We're really just starting to use wikis and blogs. I mean, some teams use it more than others, but I wouldn't say that it's fully institutionalized at all. It's still fairly new, even within a progressive company like Cisco, but it's definitely the way that things are going to go.
Interesting. So we have the 6 key success factors. The first one is foster effective communications. Then we've had focus on building relationships and trust. Then establish team identity and key processes, conduct effective virtual meetings, recognize and reward team members, and finally enable collaboration and communication with technology. Is one of these 6 more important than the others?
Well, Cornelius, they're all important because I think you need all of them. But to be honest, if you don't build relationships and have trust, then I think you really set yourself to fail up in the virtual environment. You really need to focus on that first. You can do virtual teaming with a phone. But if people don't have any type of relationship or trust built up, it doesn't matter how sexy the tools are. It's not going to happen.
Would this also be a recommendation to a new project manager who comes to you and says, I've got this new virtual team. What do I do? Where do I start?
I always tell people to start focusing on communication and having really clear roles and responsibilities in the team, really clear vision and goals. Things that you do on any good team, but you just have to take it to a much higher level and consistently reinforce it and really think about it even more.
And I guess while you can do this rather informally with a co-located team, with a virtual team, this has to be extremely formal. It has to be written down, it has to be communicated, it has to be repeated. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, consider most teams do status reports or they do team meeting minutes. I mean, consider having your goals and vision on the top of every set of minutes that goes out. And, I have to be a real stickler about minutes and documentation and storing key project documents in a place that everybody can get to, which isn't the hard drive of your PC, by the way. So whatever you've got at work, whatever you've got to
Yes.
enable that, I mean, that is really important because you just can't reach over the cube or look around the corner and say, hey, Cornelius, what did we decide at that meeting? It's really hard to do that. So things really need to have to be in writing, and there just has to be this constant closed loop feedback. Do they get it? Do they understand it? Did I hear it right? Is everybody on the same page, moving in the right direction?
Let's take a look into a few issues that you've had on your projects, if you don't mind. Can you give us a couple of examples of things that didn't go as expected and how you resolved them?
Yes. Fairly early on, I was doing a project. It was actually when I was a consulting project manager for my current company. And I made the assumption that a pretty critical area of the project was being handled by this team that was in overseas. And I thought because of a few conversations we had that everything was fine and it was well underway. And I didn't follow up closely and I didn't ask enough questions. And when it came pretty close, we were about a week away from implementing, and they're like, oh no, we actually haven't even started on that. We've been working on these other things over there. So we called a really quick, very collaborative and colorful meeting with the program manager to let him know what was going on. And, and then we did get a plan together to rectify it. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the reasons I always stress the, constant closed loop feedback, active listening, following up with people on deliverables, making sure they're where they're supposed to be. Because I think if we'd been in the room together and we kind of had the schedule up on the board and we'd been, doing what we normally do, that probably wouldn't have fallen through the cracks so easily. And then I've had more personal, sort of soft skill issues where, I had one guy that I was working with, and again, making those assumptions that he was on board. And I found out that he was actually really disappointed that he hadn't gotten this lead position that I had gotten.
Oh.
And I didn't know that. And I didn't really talk to him. I was just really excited about getting the new role that I had gotten. And I, started out pulling the team and running the team quickly. And through reaching out to him, building some trust, he talked to me about, his disappointment. And because he'd been a little resistant and a little, kind of bullish on the calls. And what I ended up doing was I made him a co-lead. I was able to make him a co-lead on the project, and he was from Europe, and so we had a combined U.S. European leadership of this particular track of the project, and it was extremely successful.
Very nice.
But because he was over in Europe and I didn't see him, and I didn't hear the muttering and or see the hallway chats or see his face, I just assumed he was fully on board with being on my team. So that's a couple of things that I've walked through.
Now, in conclusion, where would you say the virtual teams are going in the future, and what can we project managers do to get ready for this?
Well, I know at my company, as technology evolves and the Web 2.0 tools become more mature, we're looking at more and more virtual teaming to save on transportation costs. We spend a lot of money on travel. And so as technologies become more mature, we're being asked more and more not to travel and to instead use the technology, which in fact at Cisco, it's the technology that we're pioneering for our customers. So we're very big on eating our own dog food, as we say, and using our own technology. So I think that, from a budgetary standpoint, it's much more cost effective to do virtual teaming. Now that technology's catching up, it's becoming more practical to do virtual teaming. So as a project manager, I really encourage you guys to work on your soft skills, work on your communication skills, and start practicing really on that active listening, increasing the amount of communication you do. Think about ensuring you've got clear roles and responsibilities. looking for common places to share documents. Get all that done now because they're good practices, even if you're not on a virtual team. It is coming. If it's not where you are now, it most likely will be. So start getting ready now for that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time so far. We always end our interviews with the same 10 questions, the final 10. And I always have to cheat because I never know what they are. I've done this so often, I still don't know them. You ready for those?
I'm ready, Cornelius.
Okay. Got your little cheat sheet there, just like me.
I have my cheat sheet, just like Cornelius, just to let you guys know that can't see us.
So, number 1, what was your favorite project?
Oh, my favorite project was, I talked a little bit about an issue on it, but it was actually my favorite project. When I was first at Cisco, I was asked to lead a global network upgrade for a rather large customer and here in Southern California. And it was my favorite project because we all got to sit together for 15 months in a double-wide trailer at their corporate headquarters. So we had our own little spot. I mean, it was really ideal. Some of the people were, around the world, but the majority of the team was co-located in the trailer. And what made this project so successful was that we had incredibly strong executive sponsorship. We had a very cool logo and tagline. We seemed to have amazing level of funding so that we got to do posters and do a lot of dinners and do a lot of the fun stuff. And we had completely dedicated resources. It was really just the dream project.
Wow.
And it was very successful. We finished early and under budget and got to learn a lot on that project. And I just really enjoyed it. And it was actually my very first taste at virtual leadership.
Wow. So then question number 2 is going to be difficult for you. Number 2, what project would you like to have managed? That one?
Well, I'm glad I got to manage that one, but I think I would have liked to have managed the Big Dig in Boston.
Oh, really?
Because I think they really could have used some strong project management there.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, the Big Dig, that is a motorway project, right?
Yeah, it was
going
actually
underground.
taking an elevated road that went right through the center of Boston and putting it underground.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very big overrun and a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I think it went about, 6 years longer than it was supposed to. It's actually very successful in the end. I've gotten to drive through there a few times. Would have been fun to work on that one.
Number 3, what is your favorite project management book?
Well, I'm very big on leadership and soft skills. And my favorite book that I've read over the last few years is called The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team by Patrick Lencioni. And it really talks about leadership aspects of project management. And he gives some great tools for building high-performing teams. He talks about how to build trust, how to enable conflict, because without trust, you're not going to get to conflict. And then without conflict, you can't build commitment, which is his next step. Without commitment, you can't foster accountability. It's hard for us to hold each other accountable on the team. And darn, if we're not holding each other accountable, we're not delivering results, no doubt. So it's told in a kind of a fable format, so real easy read, but some really important tips and I think thoughts for people in there. There's also a workbook that accompanies in it that has some great team building exercises that you can use with your team.
Mm-hmm. Number 4, what is the topic of the next seminar that you're planning to attend?
I really want to attend a seminar on something that's called appreciative inquiry. So we tend to do problem solving by looking at everything that's wrong. But in appreciative inquiry, you look at everything that's right or everything you'd want to have in a particular solution. So it really focuses on exploring what gives life to human systems when they're functioning at their best. So if we were functioning at our best, what would it look like? And also the other thing, and I'm pretty passionate about this, but looking at solving business challenges by looking at organizational strengths as opposed to weaknesses. So let's build on our strengths and mitigate our weaknesses.
Interesting.
So I want to learn more about that.
Number 5, what is the best way to make a project fail?
Unclear roles and responsibilities and inadequate communication.
I could have guessed. Number 6, how do you like to celebrate a successful project?
Well, if I have the funding, I love to go out for a very expensive dinner with my whole team flown in to attend. But no, I really try to keep it simple and really reward and recognize people and do some fun things with the team in order to recognize their accomplishments. And, so often as project managers, we're so busy to move on to the next thing, we forget that step. and it's so important to recognize the accomplishments of the team.
Number 7, in your projects, where do you focus most of your attention in order to be successful?
Planning, the planning aspect up front, and most heavily on communication.
Number 8, if you weren't a project manager, what would you like to be?
I want to be and will be a motivational speaker.
Oh, okay.
So I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to do this podcast.
Absolutely. Number 9, what is the one thing that a project manager cannot live without?
Well, I'm going to have to say two. One would be a fantastic team, but secondly, a strong network of colleagues, because it's all about relationships. You can't do it alone.
And finally, the oldest question in project management, number 10 here. What is more important in a project manager? Project management expertise or industry expertise?
Well, for me, it's hands down, it's project management expertise, because I can bring industry experts onto my team. But if I'm not a good project manager and a strong leader, I don't see how all the experts in the world are going to help a project be successful.
Adrian, thank you very much for having been on the program. I enjoyed myself.
Thanks, Cornelius. Thanks. I had a great time.
That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. By the way, Adrian's presentation that we mentioned during the interview is available as an accompanying PDF document to today's episode. If you are using iTunes or any other podcatching software, it should already have been downloaded to your computer. If you are listening to this through the website, then simply click a little bit lower where it says Adrian's presentation in PDF format. You can find a link to purchase the books that today's interview guest or any other interview guest have mentioned in the helpful resources section on our website. As always, you can find us on the web at www.thepmpodcast.com. And if you are a project manager who wants to become a PMP, you can visit us at www.pmprepcast.com. In this sister podcast, we teach you the concepts, tools, and techniques that you need to know in order to pass the PMP exam. Please send your emails and questions to pmpodcast@gmail.com. And when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. A minute saved at the start of a project is just as effective as a minute saved at the end of a project. Until next time.